I don't think there is any real degree. The independence is much more apparent than it is realistic. It's appearance sake.
In practical terms, it doesn't mean anything.
In practical terms, it just means that a lot of services are duplicated.
Let's talk a little bit about the municipalities, the busy Union of Municipalities. And I was there for one day, and I heard a couple of speeches, mainly by Minister of Housing and Social Development, Rick Coleman.
We're presently in probably what is the most aggressive housing strategy in Canadian history in British Columbia for people with homelessness, mental health, and addictions. We've bought 45 properties across BC, renovated them, and turned them into supportive housing for people that have those issues. We're building over 2,000 units, and we built 2,000. We have actually on the go right now about $400 million in capital, not counting the buildings we bought and renovated, which cost us about another $250 million.
I was wondering your reaction to that wonderful policy.
Well, I guess you can say it's the best in Canada if you recognize the rest of Canada doesn't have any policy. So any policy would be better than none. There is no national housing strategy in Canada.
But he said he's putting a lot of money into it. And
he's putting a lot of money into buying old hotel buildings in downtown East Side. That's where he's putting a lot of money in. There's a lot of people who own those derelict hotels who are making an awful lot of money out of the purchases. But as far as any new housing units, is that he's doing a terrible job of creating any of them. His focus is totally on getting the downtown East Side cleaned up for the Olympics and putting those people anywhere he can in the Lower Mainland other than the downtown East Side. That's his objective. That's the duty he's had for the Premier, and that's what he continues to do. And he's continually blustering that he's doing more than he really is. And yet at the same time, great example right here in our local municipality is there was a project in which a seniors' home was going to expand to increase the number of beds that they were able to provide, subsidized beds in a seniors' home. They had to subdivide their property in order to do so.
Was that here in Burnaby?
Right here in Burnaby.
Okay.
Mr. I'm spending a lot of money on housing. You know what he did? He was charging them the property tax on the subdivision so that they were going to have to make their property tax payment to the provincial government as if it were a transfer because they subdivided. So $1 million it would have cost for them to be able to make the subdivision of their property. We've been writing letters. To this point, they're continuing to charge it. So on the one hand, we are providing as a city, we are providing to this society around $400,000 in deferred payments for our infrastructure, for our permits, for all of the additional fees on it. We're providing them with that free. And he, in the meantime, is charging them $1 million in this illusory property transfer tax as they transfer the property to themselves. So tell me about the bluster of this minister and whether or not he actually cares about affordable housing.
Well, he said...
And I can tell you why you're probably not seeing much of it in Burnaby as much as you might be in other communities, because Burnaby is not a community that's ever offered up a piece of land or fast-tracked a zoning for us. We get that in Vancouver, in Richmond, in Victoria, Kelowna, Prince George, Surrey, Langley, Maple Ridge, Abbotsford have all put up land. Have all put up land as the Premier challenged them to do a few years ago, and that's one community that's never done it. But do, by the way, put additional costs every time we try and put a project in that community of additional parking and costs that are unnecessary to the ability of that project to deliver for the citizens of that community. Okay.
First of all, he is right about one thing. We haven't given him any of our land, and we don't intend to. The last thing I would be doing is giving land to the provincial government, particularly since in our community the provincial government's been selling their land to the private sector for development. Now, when they're selling hundreds of acres of land to the private sector and making profit off of them, why would we give them the city's land? That's ridiculous. And for him to say that is beyond comprehension. Is that if he wanted social housing on land, he should have kept the land that they had and put social housing on it. We offered to buy the land off of him so that we could put social housing on it. They refused to sell it to us, and they in fact sold the land for $3 million less to a private developer. So, if he wants to talk about buying and selling land in Burnaby, I would love to get an opportunity to sit down and debate this issue with Minister Coleman. We, in fact, fast-track all social housing projects in our community above all others. And, in fact, we've reduced parking requirements in social housing projects because of special needs. We've in fact, waived fees and charges in social housing projects. Recently, with the new Chelsea project, providing seniors housing through the Legion, we provided them with $200,000 in permit fee waivers. The Marguerite Dixon Transition House, again, we provided them with $100,000. New social housing project for seniors, we provided about $400,000. So we've been donating direct money. He hasn't contributed any money to any of these projects through his ministry. So I don't know where that $400 million is going, but it certainly is not going into the community. In addition, we've created 20 units of actual housing as a result of our amenity bonuses in some of our modern developments, and donated those housing units to the mentally handicapped and some of the units to the Metro Vancouver Housing Authority. We've built more units of social housing in Burnaby than the minister has in the last 9 years.
On the rest of the province?
I don't know what he's done in the rest of the province, but I know what he's done in Burnaby, which would be nothing.
Well, he claims that other municipalities have, or at least he was implying that other municipalities, he mentioned other municipalities that have volunteer land for housing, and he said except Burnaby. So I was wondering why the other municipalities are doing what you think it's incorrect.
I have no idea why municipalities would give land to the provincial government. None whatsoever, but I don't intend to do it, and my council doesn't intend to do it. If anybody can afford land, if you can afford to build a $900 million convention center in downtown Vancouver, I'm not holding any tag days for the provincial government. If they can afford to build an $800 million road to Whistler, I'm not holding any tag days for the provincial government.
Okay, another related issue. He says over 8,000 families presently receive subsidies, rental subsidies.
And maybe I'll try and answer your question around housing. But first of all, I should tell you that whether you're in the north end of the island or anywhere in the province of British Columbia today, in the last 3 years alone, over 8,000 families presently get a check every month to offset their rent because they're low income. If they're making under $35,000 a year in this province and they have children, they can apply for a rent assistance program. 8,000 people, 8,000 families. If you tried to build 8,000 residences, it would cost you somewhere around $2 billion.
So it seems that subsidizing is less expensive than building new housing, new social housing. Would you agree with that statement?
No. And I think, first of all, that very often what you find is those people are put in exactly the same situation they were before, because that subsidy is eaten up by the landlords very, very quickly, so that they end up still paying half of their income for rent. So it doesn't give any long-term solution for those people. It's a stopgap measure. And as vacancies increase, the rent will go up, and they will find themselves in the same situation. This idea that rental subsidies are going to solve the problem is ridiculous. And the amount of people who are getting rental subsidies is very low. 8,000 families is nowhere near the amount of families that are in poverty in British Columbia or in the Lower Mainland. So I don't know where he gets that kind of information from.
Yeah, it's low, but it's not like he's not doing anything. He's doing something, and he claims that's the best. The best way to go is to give the rental subsidies. Of course, you're saying that's not correct.